Prey 2017 is quite frankly one of the best games ever made. This isn't me being biased, by the way. In terms of its design with its levels and gameplay, it is literally perfect. Aside from the crosshair placement for the pistol, seriously, this should be considered a war crime to the eyes or something. Prey is literally perfect. It's the exact game that Ubisoft and many other studios describe their game as. You know what I mean, right? Like how they always talk about player choice with different ways to tackle objectives, but all that quote-unquote player choice really boils down to is picking off a few enemies in an open area with stealth.
What's going on?
Or going in loud. There isn't really a unique way of doing anything within these games. The mechanics and design of everything just refuse to allow it. A lot of games have tried this approach, but none of them have managed to do it successfully, because I mean, being able to tackle an objective in a million different ways is probably such a ball ache to design. And yeah, it is. Which is why I respect Prey even more, because it does this exact thing perfectly. There are so many options and choices in Prey, even for doing the most mundane things, like getting through this doorway here. As you can see, it's blocked off by extremely heavy objects that we can't lift. Now one thing we can do to get through here is by upgrading ourselves with our valuable items, the neuromods, and spec into leverage, allowing us to lift up the heavy objects and throw them out of the way. Or we can remember the game we're playing, save our valuable upgrade materials, and just throw a recycle charge that completely evaporates everything around it. Now that's only two options for tackling this. Due to the incredible design of Prey, there is probably a way you can get into this room by accessing a vent or going around. Literally the possibilities are endless just for this room. Another example is a bunch of panels blocking your way. In most games, you just have to find a different entrance, but not in Prey. Instead, you can turn yourself into a mug and roll through the tiny gap. Okay, I got one more example. There are multiple ways of accessing a locked door leading to the next section of the video. You could go out and try and locate the keycard to access it, or you could pry the doors open by speccing into leverage again, because you want me to get to the point already. Even though it is incredibly designed and the possibilities within it are endless, Prey didn't sell well at all. Yet despite this, Arcane Austin, may they rest in peace, didn't give up with the game, releasing a DLC just over a year after, and that DLC was called Prey Mooncrash. Mooncrash has you playing as a hacker called Peter. They live aboard a satellite orbiting the moon. This is for a reason, as the company they work for, Chasma, are forcing him to figure out what happened at the moon base known as Pythias. He does this by taking control of one of the 5 survivors for a simulation, figuring out exactly how they escape. These 5 characters you can choose from are the Volunteer, who specializes in Typhon abilities due to the fact he offered to test out the experimentation of the neuromod, leaving him in the crack-induced state he's in. The second survivor is the director, Riley Yu, a family member of the main character Morgan. She mainly has human abilities, but her psychoscope allows her to unlock Typhon abilities that you can spec into with the neuromods. The third survivor is the security officer. He focuses on damage with firearms. He even comes equipped with a shotgun at the start. The fourth survivor is the custodian, Claire Witten. She starts with this cool little blade. It's pretty cool. It's got a little range attack. The final survivor is the engineer, Joan Winslow, who specializes in tech and hacking, starting with a wrench and spare parts that can be used to fix broken objects. What makes Mooncrash unique is the fact there is no definitive way you can experience how these survivors escape the moon base, because Prey Mooncrash is a roguelike. I know hearing that word is enough to put anyone off a game, because we sure don't have enough of them on the market, do we? Random Generation sure is fun and well designed, but you gotta remember, this is Prey, and Mooncrash takes place in a fully designed area. The only randomized elements are enemy placements, what items bodies have on them, and hazards within the areas. It is incredibly unpredictable. Areas you would have thought were safe could have all kinds of random issues happen on different runs, like for example a radiation leak, or probably the worst one you can get, a power outage. Seriously, you have no idea how much the lights being off can hinder any form of basic progress. You can't even open normal doors without that shit. Regarding the ways you can escape the moon base, well, they can completely vary. There's simple ways like taking an escape pod or sticking a neuromod in your eyes to learn how to pilot a shuttle. Then there's ways like transferring your mind into a drone, or stocking up on food and drinks to shove into a storage container that you shoot out into space manually. There are even escape routes that require you to enter the simulation as one character character to complete a task unique to them, which in turn allows another character to escape through that method. Like the engineer repairing a teleporter. Like I've said, the main goal is to have all 5 characters escape in some sort of way, but the catch is it all has to be within one go. And if you die on your journey as a certain character, they're fully dead until you reset the simulation. In fact, resetting the simulation is what allows the roguelike elements to come in with the randomization. Oh, I should probably mention, there is actually a progression system. It's not just you bashing your head against the wall to see what works constantly. Abilities you unlock with neuromods stay forever, even if you reset the simulation. There's also a currency you can get by just killing enemies or completing tasks that you can use to buy items, and you can get more items in the shop from fabrications you can find throughout the moonbase, which incentivizes exploration is great, which in turn makes killing the Typhon a lot easier. Speaking of the Typhon actually, these black mold creatures that are related to the molded from RE7 and might also be the shit lurking on JK Rowling's walls, well, they're all here from the base game, and you have no clue where or what form of Typhon you'll be encountering on the moonbase. And if you've played the base game of Prey, then you know about that paranoia you feel in a room full of random ass objects, terrified of a mimic jumping out at you. Imagine that feeling, but amplified, because you can't memorize where the mimics will be hiding. It's completely different every single time. This doesn't just change on a simulation reset though. You may have noticed this bar in the top right. Well, this is the corruption bar. The longer you play, the more it goes up. It has 6 levels, with each level making the corruption raise, which in turn spawns in stronger Typhon, which also refills areas that you've cleaned out. And this keeps on ramping up until you get to the 6th level of corruption, where the simulation just shuts down. It creates an amazing feeling of tension and makes you think on your feet way more knowing there's a time limit looming over your head. It isn't unfair either, it goes up pretty slowly, and you can find these hourglasses around the moonbase that take some progress off the corruption bar. The challenge created by the corruption isn't the only thing that's gonna fuck you up though. With this DLC, Arcane added new hardcore elements to Prey, those being weapon degradation and status effects. Before you pick up a weapon in Mooncrash, a percentage will be displayed. This percentage is how much use is left within the gun, and when that percentage has completely gone down, the gun jams and just breaks down, with each one having their own unique animation. It's really cool. Of course it's not cool when you're in the middle of a fight with the corruption nearing 6, but I wouldn't know the feeling because I have no footage of it due to my skill. Now the status effects are caused by the certain ways you can be damaged, and let me tell you, there are a lot of ways you can get hurt.
I'm in pain, Mom.
You can take a lot of fall damage, which makes you break your leg, preventing you from running with this ghastly bone snapping sound every time you try to. It's genuinely grim, I hate it. There's also shit like radiation poisoning, which causes you to sway when you move. There's severe burns that cap your health, and there's also shit like hemorrhages, making you lose health constantly. You can get these status effects so easily, making you play far more carefully than you would in the base game. Speaking of the base game, Arcane actually updated it, so you can turn these features on, as if the base game wasn't already pretty challenging without them. They're just accommodating the masochists, I guess. And yeah, that's Mooncrash. But before I finish up this video, I want to mention the other Prey DLC. That's right, there was a second DLC for this game, Prey Typhon Hunter. It came for free alongside Mooncrash, and well, it wasn't exactly well received, to put it lightly. This is mainly because Typhon Hunter was a really strange experiment, and by experiment, I mean a multiplayer game built on a completely different engine made by like interns or some shit. It was a prop hunt mode where someone played as Morgan Yu and everyone else was mimics disguising as the props trying to get the jump on them. I remember it being kind of decent, but I could be wrong, so let's boot it up and see if it's like I remember. Honestly, I have no idea what I was even expecting. There was another thing packaged onto Typhon Hunter, and it was a VR mode for Prey, which also felt really tacked on. To be fair, it was during that era where Bethesda was dabbling into the VR genre, which is something they never did again. Prey VR is basically just glorified escape rooms within Talos 1, which sounds really cool on paper, but this is an incredibly underbaked VR game, and everything about it just feels weird. Like, all of the proportions for the locations are way bigger than they are in the game, like Morgan's room and their office. They just don't feel the same, and it's not the VR immersion I was expecting. It's a shame because it truly is a really cool premise. To be fair, there's this awesome museum where you can get up close and personal to the Typhon in VR, witnessing the true scale of shit like a nightmare. It's kind of terrifying. It sure is a good thing that Mooncrash alone is worth it, and Typhon Hunter just feels like a little extra thing you'll probably never install anyway. If you own Prey, play Mooncrash. I hear absolutely nobody talking about it, even less than the base game, which is absolutely insane to me. I truthfully believe this DLC alone is better than most games out there, and you can get a lot of enjoyment out of it. By the way, I plan on making a big video on the base game of Prey for when I hit 100,000 subscribers, so make sure to like and subscribe if you'd like to see that.